I'm here to discuss the so-called flying saucers.
The whole fleet of them look on the SA. Oh my gosh. That's not an LNS though, is it? It's not LNS.
The acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
We have spacecraft from another species.
We do, yeah.
How many?
Quite a number.
Since 1947, we have received and analyzed between 1 and 2,000 reports that have been made by credible observers of relatively incredible things.
Welcome, everybody, to another exciting episode of the Unidentified Anomalous Podcast. I'm Digby Furno, and joining me, as always, my wonderful co-host, Tom Thompson. Today, we have a truly special guest with us. We are thrilled to welcome a distinguished scientist whose work has made significant contributions to the fields of immunology, cell biology, and beyond.
Our guest today is none other than Professor Garry Nolan. Professor Nolan is the Rackford and Carlota A. Harris Professor in the Department of Pathology at Stanford University. He is renowned for his groundbreaking research in immunology and cancer, where his innovative techniques have revolutionized our understanding of cell signaling and immune responses.
Professor Nolan has authored over 200 peer-reviewed publications and holds numerous patents. His work has not only advanced scientific knowledge, but has also paved the way for new therapeutic approaches in medicine. He is also a recipient of multiple prestigious awards, reflecting his exceptional contribution to science and research.
But today, we are diving into a different realm of his expertise. Professor Nolan has garnered worldwide attention for his intriguing research and perspectives on unidentified aerial phenomenon and the broader questions they pose about our universe and our place within it.
Additionally, Professor Nolan is the founding member of the Soul Foundation, an organization dedicated to the rigorous scientific investigation of unidentified aerial phenomena. The Soul Foundation seeks to bring together scientists, researchers, and experts from various fields to explore these mysteries with an open and analytical approach, fostering greater understanding and transparency in the study of these phenomena.
Without further ado, let's welcome to the Unidentified Anomalous Podcast the brilliant and inquisitive mind, Professor Garry Nolan. Professor, thank you for joining us today. How are you?
I'm amazing.
I love that.
Don't mean to brag.
It's great.
It's good. It's good. It's been an interesting week. I think a lot of us were blindsided on Sunday with Matt Ford's Good Trouble show with Dr. O'Connor that came on. And, you know, I think a lot of people in the past were looking at the Nazca Mummies and everybody just thought they were fake. Tom and I have sort of kept an open mind about it. But you interjected on the show and sent a signal message to Matt and sort of came out and said how interested you were in the presentation that Dr. O'Connor put forward. What do you think were the key points in that for you that drew your attention?
Well, first, I think, you know, as is usual, the Twitter sphere, X sphere, went a little overboard on how they should interpret what I was saying. What I meant was it was an extremely well done scientific presentation, which was, you know, at least up to the end of the part of where they were talking about Nazca. Discussion afterwards was all speculation, and I really don't have anything to say about that. So what I found compelling was his, let's say, dissection of the images, right, and of the DICOM images, the 3D. And perhaps what I found most interesting was at least his claim that he didn't see how they could have been constructed. Now, obviously, a claim like that needs to be truly verified at the source with the original materials, with a redo. It's not that the people who did it originally did a bad job, not at all. It's just that anything as extraordinary as this needs to be double checked. It doesn't need extraordinary evidence. It just needs evidence. So I just found it got me a little bit more interested again. There was a video about even almost a year or two ago from what I think was an anthropologist who was taking apart some of the X-rays of at least one of the specimens, and which compellingly showed or suggested that this was made of parts. Yes. But it wasn't, and that was a compelling argument. I think what I didn't understand, at least at the time, was that there are multiple specimens. And those multiple specimens are of such variety that to conclude everything from one would be a mistake. And so in looking at some of the images, they're interesting. If somebody wants to spend the time to go into it deeply, as people have done, that's their right. A fair amount of money has been put towards it pro bono by people, at least in terms of in-kind effort. So, the nice thing is that it's being done openly. I haven't seen anything apart from that other one about maybe one of the mummies that says, well, these are clearly fakes. But they're just because they're not clearly fakes doesn't mean they might not be fakes. But right. It also suggests that it's worth additional time to look into. Again, I think it was his mention. I was actually speaking with a colleague in the Department of Pathology here who's also interested in this area. And he said, and he's an MD, I'm not. He said the discussion around the ligature and that they could trace the blood vessels, that he thought was interesting. That would be hard to fake. Hard to fake doesn't mean it wasn't faked. So, right. I think that's about as far as you can dare say. One other thing I would like to correct people in their thinking is around these claims of 70% of the DNA doesn't match. Well, 70% of the DNA doesn't match doesn't mean that it's from Alpha Centauri. It just means that the DNA might be so degraded as to be impossible to align against the known sequences from human or anybody else. Now, we had a very similar problem to that with the Atacama in the early days, in that, when first we looked over the sequences, an incredible number of sequences didn't match. So, what do? You go and you talk to an expert. And what do the experts in ancient DNA say? Well, here's the problems with it, and here's how you fix it. And here's how you can reinterpret the noise and actually make a signal out of it. And so I think that that's what needs to be done here. So I don't think people should be running for headlines just because DNA doesn't match. I could take any of you, put you in a time capsule, 400 years ago, put you in a grave. Please do. And then dig you up and look at your DNA. And 70% of it first run wouldn't match. Doesn't mean you're a grandpa.
That's true. This is why I really personally appreciate your approach to all of this too, is because, data is the most convincing piece of evidence that I think you could present, right? Like finding these patterns. It's like, well, if you don't believe the conclusion, look at the data and what does the data tell you? And you had made a really interesting comment. I actually heard it while I was in the middle of work the other day, and I move furniture for a living, like my day job, and I stopped what I was doing, I paused it, and I went around a corner and was rewinding it, and I was like, wait, I got to hear this again. It was this mention of objects that have been observed. There's data to suggest that they don't necessarily, I believe you said, conform to the same command structure. If that's a good way of saying it. So I thought about that, and it's like, okay, that's a good explanation as to why they could crash. But then I thought, I wanted to ask you this. Is there data that you're aware of to suggest, along with that, that these objects have different points of origin? So, for example, is there data that shows like one could be coming in from maybe like the upper atmosphere, whereas others are just sort of popping in? You get, under
Yeah, no,
that
I
type of
understand.
thing.
So, I mean, I think Chris Mellon has mentioned this specifically, that that there's data where there seem to be objects that coming from outside of our atmosphere, and then of course there's the ones people claim are coming from the ocean, etc. Whether they are, I mean, I had this conversation once with Jacques Vallée. Is it one thing or is it many things? And the response that Jacques gave me was typically annoying, which was, well, it could be one thing pretending to be many things. Or it could be one thing that you're misinterpreting as many things. And so, I mean, look, we have a whole retinue of car designs. Maybe if this stuff is real, they do too. Different shapes for different purposes. I don't know. I just don't know.
One of the things that struck me about the presentation on the Good Trouble show was looking at the mummies and looking at the different varieties that they had there. So one was clearly pregnant from the scan. The other one was a humanoid reptilian and had eggs that you could see on the scan. And then I was thinking, are these from separate planets, or are we potentially looking at the fact that they do look otherwise facially very similar? Are they from the same planet, and have they just had multiple species that of higher intelligence that are formed on a singular planet? And then is there some sort of hierarchy to the structure of the larger?
I don't know. I mean, that was my question around, is there a caste system? I mean, why are both of these kinds of things, specimens, let's call them, let's just be general about it, found in the same graveyard? I mean, that implies some kind of interaction. I mean, this is all assuming that they're real, right? Or assuming that nobody basically, made them up in a village somewhere, and rather than selling them at Costco, decided to put them in a, in a diatomaceous earth grave. I don't know. And so, it's just intriguing and it's fun. And I don't get why people don't find, I mean, how many of us have sat around in college drinking or smoking things, and then having a wild conversation about stuff? And does that, and that's the fun, the fun of science. It's funny. I was, without saying who or what, I was just on a call and being asked to be an expert witness in a litigation around biology. And they're like, well, we have this information about you. We see that you're interested in ufology. If somebody were to attack you on the stand, would you have a problem with that? I'm like, no, I get attacked every day. Go look at my Twitter feed. Why? Because, the turnaround is, this is about the science, and why are some questions off the table until they've been disproven? It's perfectly fine to, at the very least, have fun. I'm interested in the beyond fun. I'm interested in the practicality of what we might learn.
Yeah,
and use.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the biggest unanswered question to humanity, and the difference that it would make to humanity, I think, would be.
Well, but people say, well, why is not everybody interested? So, after Matt's show, I called my husband in and showed him some of the pictures. I said, what do you think? I mean, look at this. He's like, oh, okay. And then he wanted and so I just was sort of mouth agape. Like, okay. If it doesn't put food on his table, he's not interested.
So you don't share the same passion in ufology?
Oh my God, no. No, his comment at one point was, if any of this shit shows up at the house, I'm going to kill you.
Luckily for me, my wife is far more interested.
My mom just had a sighting recently. She's in her 60s, and she's like sort of going through ontological shock right now. And now she's saying things to me. She's like, Tommy, she's like, who are you talking to? And I'm just like, Mom, I don't know why you saw what you saw. And she's like, are you sure you don't know? And I'm like, no, I'm serious. I really don't know.
Here's the explanation I would give to her. Here's the explanation. I think, again, if these things are real, a lot of people see them, but just don't see them. Right? They see them, they go, it just doesn't, it's not context. It's like, so it doesn't fit into the frame of what they're working on thinking on the moment. And it wouldn't occur to them to say that spot moving anomalously in the sky is something to pay attention to. But because you had a conversation with her, somewhere in her subconscious, it's working out the problem.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I'm gonna literally tell her that. And be like, Mom, I got this from Dr. Garry Nolan, so hear me out.
It must be right.
That's right.
Put it on the front page of the Daily Mail, like half my other comments.
Oh God! And speaking for somebody who is British, I just have to apologise for the Daily Mail, with the exception of Christopher Sharp's articles that go in there.
Yeah, no, his are great.
Who I
adore him.
The utmost of respect of. I think he's a wonderful.
I miss Chris. We haven't talked to him in a while.
Yeah, I know. We've had him on the show a few times. He's a great guy.
Really nice guy.
I'm curious though. You're famous for your comments about Neil deGrasse Tyson, and I share your opinion on that.
Sorry, Neil, it's really anti-best. You don't know what you're talking about. Sorry.
But no, you're not. I'm not either. What do you think it's going to take to move the needle for the rest of academia to really start taking this serious?
Again, just enough data that they can't argue against. I'm not looking for results, right, to convince anybody. I mean, for some people, the only thing that's going to convince them is, a octopod walking out onto the stage with the president, right? I mean, that's what's going to be necessary. And for other people, there are different stages of proof. I've seen a lot of data that I think of as evidence. If I put it together with things that people tell me from multiple different angles, it continues to keep me interested. I get shown a lot of weird stuff that I just can't explain. And that just keeps me interested. But that's not for the public, right? And so, I think the public looks to two groups for confirmation of anything: the government, daddy, mommy, and scientists, right? As some sort of truth test, reality check. And so for me to convince a scientist that it's worth looking into, I have to find the 5-minute elevator pitch data that will get across to them that there's something interesting here. So I use, for instance, the Ariel School as an example, or James Fox's Moment of Contact. When people come back with these instant, I said, well, the first question you pose to them, the first thing you say to them is not an answer. It's a question. How much time have you really put into this? Tell me the number of hours that you've looked into this. What data do you know of? And when they say nothing, that opens the door. And especially with the scientists, if you say you're having an opinion without any knowledge of this, that's like forbidden in sciences. So at least for me in my area, that's kind of the put them on their heels approach. And then while they're, basically dazed and confused, you slip them a few data points for them to ponder. And then I usually say, if you come to a conclusion and accuse me of X, Y, or Z, then here's the data points I want you to go look at, spend some time, and then we'll have a discussion. That's how you do it. Just railing at people or quoting conspiracy theories about the government, you know, or that's just not how you do it. And the Soul Foundation, I mean, that's part of what we're doing at the Soul Foundation is setting up sort of guardrails about how you can talk about this and a safe space and bringing in professionals so that people who even have had a passing interest in it in the past can come and learn more.
Yeah. I was going to talk to you about the Soul Foundation at the end, but we can do that now as you've already brought it up. But, you know, what I mean, you've kind of already answered the question there anyway, but I'll invite you to sort of go into more detail about it. But, you know, for everybody watching this that doesn't know what the Soul Foundation is or, you know, isn't familiar with its work, what would you say the core reason behind the Soul Foundation is, and what do you really want to achieve in the next 5 years, and how do you think it can help move the needle?
Well, it's about legitimizing the question and doing what academics really do best, which is wargaming ideas against an eventuality or trying to figure out. So you're either looking forward for an eventuality and saying, what if this, or you're looking backwards trying to interpret data, history of ideas. And so the history of ideas is Peter Skafish's arena, where he, you know, writes about philosophy and anthropology and all the rest and how it affects humans, and then looking forward about how to use that and recontext it. For me, it's about you know, data materials. Where's the real material proof? Where's something that I can walk across the hall to another scientist and put the thing on the table and say, here's this is my finding, you check it, tell me if I'm right. Tell me if I'm wrong. I would much rather hear that I'm wrong than that I'm right. Because if I'm right, I still worry that they misinterpreted it as well. So, you know, it's because once you do that, then you can have the conversation. So, and then Dave Grush's involvement is his knowledge of the internal workings of what it is that he's, you know, claims to have seen, and the, you know, the kind of policy efforts that might be required to change the discussion in government. And so, you know, we had, for instance, Carl Nell out to the Soul Symposia at Stanford. It was a great talk. And so it's that level of discourse that we're trying to have. I mean, Carl's knowledge of how you write laws and why you put certain kinds of languages in, whether, you know, whether each of those parts of the thing were the right thing to do or not, even Carl doesn't know. But he's like, look, I need to get it on the table. Like eminent domain. We need to get it on the table. I personally, and he knows this, I personally disagreed that it was something that we should be doing. But his point was, which I understand, is, well, if we don't have that as a leverage, you're never going to get anything out of anybody. You know, they'll just say we don't have it, because if you admit that you have it, then then the law says the government can take it. So I understand that, and I understand, you know, Brandon Fugel's and Travis Taylor's issue there. And so, what's the answer? The answer might be, well, you don't need to give it back to us. We just want to know what you did with it, right? And or, you know, all the intellectual property belongs to you. That's really what anybody
gives a
crap about. The only reason you might want to keep any of this stuff from a commercial standpoint is that you're interested in the intellectual property and profiting from it. That's fine. I'm perfectly fine with that. And anybody who wants to accuse everybody else of being a grifter or whatever, I don't even know what that word means. They've completely destroyed the meaning of the word. It actually means fraud. You know, but now they've expanded it to be anybody who does something I don't like.
I'm not allowed to write a book about this topic. I'm not. I mean,
Right.
I'm just like, oh, go to hell.
They think it's any time that somebody wants to make some money out of it, that they're automatically a grifter.
Welcome
And I
to
hate it as well.
capitalistic society.
Yeah.
Tom
You
and
have to
I
eat.
give up a lot of our time to do our podcast. Do we want to be monetized for it in the future? Yeah, we would, because our time, like everybody else's time, is worth money. It doesn't mean we're trying to be fraudulent in the arena of ufology to get fake information out to make money out of it. That's a completely different.
Well,
thing.
at the end of the conversation I had with these lawyers as they were interviewing me for this thing, was okay. Well, because they said, why would a scientist be interested in this? I said, well, let me ask you a question. Can you patent reverse engineer technology from a non-human entity? Patent law says if it's already been invented, you can't patent it. But on the other hand, patent law only involves humans. So are they, if something other than human invented it, are you allowed to copy it and patent it? One of their answers was interesting. It was like, well, the only way that you can't copy it is if the inventor, meaning the other people, have filed a patent. And if you don't know who the inventors are, then it's kind of free for use. That was at least one lawyer's opinion. I mean, two lawyers in a room with more than one opinion is a lawsuit. So, but that got them thinking. And that's what the Soul Foundation is meant to do, get people thinking about legitimate and interesting questions.
Yes.
I love
Yeah,
that.
no, I
And
get
that's
that.
what needs to happen with this subject at this point, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's one of the most profound questions that any of us could ever ask. And this is sort of a bridge to my question too. I had to write a monologue recently. There were 2 rounds. It was a little competition that happened on X, and my argument, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, was that the scientific method is good, and it has done wonderful things for our species throughout history. But when you start talking about things like NHI, and then you bring in, say, consciousness and psi phenomenon and things that sort of get into the metaphysical, and like the things that maybe like Bernardo Kastrup is sort of investigating, that we need to potentially consider some sort of overhaul to the scientific method, and not that we destroy it and build it back up again, but that there maybe needs to be some sort of asterisks in place, because I feel like you read Jacques Vallée, or if you read like John Keel or Fortean material, we could be dealing with something that has the ability to basically evade our scientific method. So what do you do against that?
That is the question that I ask myself so often. I was talking with some people the other day who've set up these cameras and things, and just like they didn't know anything about Skinwalker Ranch, but just like there, they say, but whenever the stuff shows up, we can see them, but our cameras stop working. You giggle. You tell that to somebody else who has no knowledge of the repeated nature of that occurrence, and they just like, oh, you're crazy.
Right. That's the problem.
Oh, you're crazy. And sorry about this. There's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah, no worries.
The phone's way in the other room. And so, yeah, that is the conundrum, the paradox of this is designing an experiment around repeatability, or at the very least getting repeated observations of something. If you repeatedly have a camera that shuts down, that is data, right?
Yes,
if you can document
absolutely
that happens, but you can't have it on 100 different cell phones around the United States, right? Of 50 different models. And so, it just means people need to turn their impatience into motivation. You can't be impatient about the movement or the rate of progress if you're not willing to step in and do something about it. and actually put your own either money or time into it. I mean, I suppose you can be impatient, but you're just not going to get any attention from me.
No, I agree.
And so, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, in talking about putting your time or your money into it, this is one of the things that people are being overly critical about at the moment. And I think one of the good things that's come up at the moment is the UAP Disclosure Fund. And I think it's a fantastic initiative. Tom and I were thinking about something similar that was going to be more whistleblower based, but we've put it on the back burner at the moment because this has come out, and I think this deserves its attention. But again, people were critical because as soon as you go and sign up, you sign the petition, then it goes, how much would you like to donate? And then everybody goes, oh, right, yeah, they want money, blah, 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 blah. But they're being ridiculous because to push forwards with this, it takes time, it takes effort, and it takes money.
If you want people who are working with that foundation, that group, to fly to Washington, that costs money. Yeah. I mean, I don't know anybody that's getting paid for what they're doing there. I'm not getting paid for the Sol Foundation a penny. So it, it's in my spare time, like I have any. I mean, look at the bags under my eyes today.
I know how you.
I need what do they call it? They call it the council. The council lift, where the women they like tie their hair back.
Council estate.
Yeah. And so it's it's just, I have the same problem in my group meetings sometimes, often with new postdocs who come in to the lab and want to show their stuff by criticizing somebody else's experiment incessantly. And I usually at one point or another, I'd have to take them aside or publicly say, criticisms are nowhere near as useful as solutions. Pitch your criticism with a solution. Think for them. Be collaborative. Don't be negative. I mean, if there's just a negative thing to say that's a stupid experiment, and here's the reason why, that's fine. But don't just pick apart stuff for the sake of it, because we only have so much time on this planet. Yeah. And I often look at many of this stuff around UAP as lost opportunity, time wasted, while literally Rome is burning around us, the planet. And so let's not dilly-dally. Meanwhile, get out of my way. Don't just sit there and criticize. Just, fine. Just don't show up on my threads. Well, my motto is block early, block often.
And I follow that motto.
Oh, yeah. Yep. I'd like it tattooed on my forehead at this point.
Twitter is a much nicer space when you don't have those people.
It's so easy. One button, done.
Yeah, absolutely. But this is the problem, though, isn't it, with social media, particularly with Twitter, is the fact that I think there's a lot of people that don't have anywhere to direct their attention or their energy. So actually, they're just wasting their time tearing other people down without providing a solution. Yeah.
Well, it gives that dopamine surge that they're feeding. And but there's entire academic disciplines around this now, so we don't need to retread it. But I think the question for all of us, though, is how do you turn that negative energy into something positive? How do you engage it? Because people are interested, but they're frustrated. And sometimes they're frustrated because they don't have the personal ability to do anything about the thing, or they feel that they don't. Great. And so how do you capitalize on that raw energy? And so, I mean, I don't know what the answer to that is yet, but one of the things that, if we can get around to it with all the other stuff going on at the Sol Foundation, is we're trying to organize volunteers to organize volunteers. But to get the volunteers, we have to vet them, We don't want loonies. You know, I don't want Greenstreet sneaking in with a mustache or a shaded mustache. You know,
you tell it was him by his voice anyway.
I had to go there. I had to go there. I mean, I actually like Stephen. You know, I actually like Mike. I don't like some of the stuff they do, but I actually find them personally entertaining.
Let's face it, in this field, they're probably the only ones getting paid at this point. So,
yeah, no, I mean, it's fine what they're doing. It really is. They serve a purpose.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Do you think in a way they actually, you know, sort of benefits our community? Because do you think it helps push people forwards and actually think about the answers that they're giving?
I'm going to turn it around a little bit more funny. If that's the level of our opposition, we should have no problem.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
You know,
you need someone to there has to be checks and balances with this too, because that's the issue with UFOs in general throughout history. You have to, you know, get through the weeds to find the flowers, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, not to be personal, but sorry. What's his name? I'm blanking.
Stephen Greenstreet.
Yeah. Him in particular, he, in a way, distills a constituency and focuses it. And so I see that as useful because we need to counter arguments against that. Mm-hmm. So, you know, and that's not a negative thing. It's like that. They distill a constituency and a mode of thought that, okay, well, what's the argument against it? You know, same thing with other critics. They distill a way of thinking that you can either learn to just ignore it because they're not listening anymore, or you fashion a shield against it.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it does.
Wow. Yeah, no, that's a good thing too.
Yeah. I always try to find the positive in these things. It's like, how do you use it?
That's like whenever anybody like attacks me on Twitter, which it really isn't that often, but the more well-known our show.
No, they normally go for me.
Yeah, they usually go for Digby because I'm a lot more reserved and passive.
Well, I mean, look at that name. I mean,
it's like
I'm asking really? For it.
I mean, I'm Tom Thompson for
Attack
God's
the
sake. I mean,
with the French name. It's just
you're not the third. I'm Tom Thompson the third.
Oh wow!
Like, yeah, they did it
Jesus
3
Christ,
times,
man.
Gary. Can you believe that?
Your family needs to, you know, get some originality.
I kill people with kindness. Is actually like you were talking about that raw energy. It's like there's so many people that I see arguing, and I'm like, you know, some of these people are like really talented and like good editors and good speakers. And sometimes I'll message them and be like, I see you're getting mad, and I'm like, you should really just channel some of that into your creativity because you're really good at what you do. And sometimes it works. Sometimes they tell me to go to hell, piss off, you know. But I try. That's all I can do is try.
Yeah. Well, that's what I found in general. I think the community is very positive. But anyway, you had other questions.
I was just going to say, I mean, a lot of the talk, if you look at things, people like Tim Burchett and the sort of UAP caucus that's going on, they seem to be moving the subject away from, you know, greys and physical beings and talking about it in a much more spiritual sense now. It's almost become sort of like an angels versus demons question. Why do you think they're doing that? Or do you think that they're doing that because it's the easiest way for them to process it while still maintaining their religious beliefs? Or do you think that that side of it is more likely now?
No, I don't think it's more likely. I don't think it's less likely. I just think it's how people interpret it. You know, I mean, Jacques really encapsulated the idea perfectly in that, you know, in his book, Passport to Magonia, and in his other books, etc. It's, you know, you interpret anything according to the cultural framework in which you were raised.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, if something shows up that really looks horrific and scares the bejesus out of you, it's pretty easy to call it something negative, whether you call it a demon or whatever. I mean, every culture has an analogous term for it. And we like bifurcation. We like the binary state of good versus bad. And so we like to fill things and put things into those simple categories. Interestingly, the Muslim community through the Quran and the jinn are pretty much in between. They can be good and bad. They're betwixt in between. So there's more gray, at least in that interpretation of things. I don't know that any of it's real. And Burchett and some of the people that you're talking about are in the GOP caucus, and they are in general more spiritually or religiously inclined. And so I'm perfectly fine if that's what they want to call them. Why demons want to fly around in UFOs, I don't know. But I would think they would have, they would just use their wings, I would think.
Right.
For those that have them.
I think you're trying to be flashy.
But I would never deride that interpretation. I would only bring up data that might challenge it.
Right.
And like I said, I jokingly said, why would they fly around in UFOs, in metal canisters? I would, carefully pose that. I said there still can be, and some of the things that people see might be angels and demons, or whatever it is you want to interpret them as, according to anybody's religious context. But that doesn't exclude the fact that there might also be ETs or ultra-terrestrials or interdimensionals, or name your what they call them, tempestuals, intertempestual, time travelers.
Michael Masters' hypothesis.
Right,
all of the other things. It doesn't non-exclude the other.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of, again, my personal view, just based on the available evidence, is that a number of these things are happening or have happened either simultaneously or at, from points in history, because it's just so complicated. Even in the good data, it's muddy.
Dr. O'Connor put forward some interesting ideas that I'd actually heard before or thought of before, is that, these things look designed.
Yeah.
My point was at one point that Matt read out, was that if they're designed, it's a level of artificial intelligence that so exceeds our own as to sound almost godlike. And yet, synchronistically this morning in my feed shows up a company that has used large language models to suck up all DNA and protein structures, and they can now evolve things that nobody would have been able to design out of out of raw nature. And so
I saw that earlier.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
And so fast forward a decade or 100 years, and you could see us having the ability to tweak species in ways that we don't understand necessarily why, but the information is there. The raw data of how things interact is there to allow for you define the goal, and it will iterate the outcome for you.
Right. Oh my God, that's amazing.
It's amazing. I wonder if they have the ability to wind it back as well, because it'd be interesting to look at us and wind us back and see the way that we evolved. Because the way I look at it, and you're far more educated on these matters than I am, but it feels like through what we've discovered so far, there seems to be some massive leaps missing in our evolution throughout time. And it would be interesting to look back with an AI model like that to see if...
Yeah, maybe the AI will find the evidence that something, there was a juxtaposition of events that can't be explained traditionally. That doesn't, again, a gap, I wouldn't fill the gap with your fantasies. I'd fill a gap with ideas. And ideas can be fantastical, don't let them drag you to believe that just because you thought it, it's the right answer. And that's what humans often do.
Yeah, I'm guilty.
You said,
I mean, I'm always right. So, but I mean, aside from that,
that's right. I'm going to tell my mom that when I talk to her after the show.
I have the same problem. My wife just doesn't.
No, but I honestly tell my students this. I mean, I said, look, your ideas are equal to mine, but all ideas being equal, I'm right. You know, in other words, my experience is what should drive a decision. You can still make whatever decision you want. I'm not going to, I'm not a dictator. But I'm telling you, and if you're wrong and I was right, I will tell you I told you so.
All things being fair, right? Like, deserve that at that point. I have something on my mind too. It's going to shift the conversation in a little bit of a different direction, but just because I know your time is limited, you've mentioned in prior interviews that you've done that you've encountered pushback similar to maybe the likes of Lou Elizondo and David Grush. Do you have any thoughts about what, for lack of a better term, what organization or group of people could be responsible for this?
No, I know exactly who it was from, and it was mediated by a friend. It was, I know the reason why. I don't think they needed to go as far as they did in what they said. The point could have been made without being as let's say, draconian in their language, let's say. But I interpret what was and the way that it was said as this: you should take this seriously.
Yeah.
It wasn't an attempt to suppress me. It was an attempt to tell me not to talk about things I shouldn't be, that I know in confidence. I didn't, by the way. I alluded to something. And most people, nobody would know what it was I was alluding to, but the people who were, I was alluding to, were like, that was over the line.
Wow.
I mean, Tom and I, in a fortunate position that, we've built up some relationships over the last almost year that we've been doing the show, and we've got some good contacts of our own. And some whistleblowers that are waiting to come forward, which is a very privileged position for us to be in. But, we really need to start getting these whistleblowers out there. We need to, get them some security, protect them from things like this. What do you think needs to be done? Or what does the UAP Disclosure Fund plan to do, or what can the public do to help make this an easier process?
Well, I think first of all, the way the whistle laws work. That works. Is you can't just come forward because you know something. You have to come forward and talk about an illegality. What obviates you from your non-disclosure is some level of illegality.
Right.
Not because they bought paper clips and claimed that they were ballpoint pens, something, extraordinarily onerous. And so that's the one thing. So I think you can go in two directions. One, Congress could make the blanket statement that anything related to this is something which hasn't been disclosed to Congress, and therefore is considered, at the very least, inappropriate, but perhaps illegal.
Right.
So that the umbrella use of SAPs to protect information around this has been used as a way to shuffle money for other more legitimate purposes, or has been claimed to be for a legitimate purpose and has been used. And therefore anything, that would be one thing. That will never happen, by the way. Okay, that will never happen, nor am I advocating it. But that's sort of like, you always have to set up with the extremes and then work towards something practical. The other is kind of what you're alluding to, is that if people have claimed illegalities and yet are still not coming forward.
Yes.
Because, they do worry not for their lives necessarily, but for their livelihoods.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. They have pensions, they have children, they have family, they have, needs. They're looking to retire soon. They don't want to ruin their pension, et cetera, et cetera. And so, perhaps the U.S. government can set up a fund, for instance, to, if you come forward under the Whistleblower Act and you are under some sort of, your agency comes after you, the fund will pay your salary, equal to what it was that you were going to be compensated for anyway. Those are just ideas. And I'm not saying I've seen those ideas. I mean, I'm literally thinking them up as we're going on here. Which is probably
to be fair, this is similar to what Tom and I were talking to. We speak with Jason Sands. He came out in his Twitter space, but we were spitballing ideas with him. And one of our ideas was there should be a whistleblower fund to first of all pay fees for whistleblowers to be able to get them to Congress, because the US government won't pay for that. They won't pay for any accommodation for them. Some of these people aren't on great salaries necessarily. They also need to have some protections in place in case they lose their 401k. These people are risking everything. And, for me personally, it really pisses me off when I see people online going, well, where are all these whistleblowers then? Just come out and say it and everything like that. And it's just like, they don't owe you anything, not you as a person. They're trying to do what is right for the American people and, for people around the world at large. And I think people need to just sort of stop and appreciate that and realize what it means for them.
This just makes them feel good to say that kind of stuff. I don't have any sympathy anymore for it. I think that the world at large, just in general, back to sort of the Twitter, don't engage. And if you don't engage, then, they kind of go away.
Yeah, they get bored.
And because that's what they're looking for. But I think I think you're right. I would rather see the engagement with the whistleblower or looking for solutions like the things that you've just said. And it's more than the U.S. There's people in Britain, in all over the place that know things that just can't come forward. And I'm not waiting for them to be on their deathbed, but I hope that people who do know things and have no consequences to worry about, might say some more things. And the number of people who have done that is also kind of a data point that I find interesting. It's like, you're literally months or days from going to the next beyond, assuming there is one on the other side. And you come forward with this story. To what benefit? Do you do this?
It's your final act on Earth. It's it's so important. Honestly.
So I just find that, again, it's not conclusive of anything. And again, this is me as a scientist. Anecdotes are great for parties and fireside chats when you're camping and sitting around the clubhouse or the dorm room. It's got to be translated into actual data, which is why, for me at least, materials and let's say biologics like these mummies or whatever are catnip, because they are grist for my science thinking. I know what to do with them. I know how to do the science that could get these things, if they're real, into top journals. But I also know that you don't go for the home run. If I wanted to publish a paper, let's say in Nature on this stuff, the last thing I would do is write some giant paper claiming all this stuff, which all might be true, and I might have a line of evidence all the way up to what I could even consider proof, it would take 5 years to go through the peer review. What you would do is, let's say that there is some results from these genetics. You would, if there was something not truly anomalous in the genetics that people have done, and I haven't seen the sequences at all, you would verify that, targeted. You do like a targeted PCR, show that it's true, and just publish it in a minor journal. Here's this result, like what I did with the Council Bluffs, and where I just said, here's this result, a metal analysis from this thing that people said fell off the back of a truck, UFO truck. And I didn't make any claims, and I can't make any claims, but you do that. And so what you're doing is you're breaking the ice on this, and you're basically getting the bigger journals. You're giving them an excuse to say, well, okay, they've already published this. Because once it's published, it becomes sometimes even more than data. It almost can be used as evidence. It's supporting evidence.
Right.
And so I would litter the literature with tiny results. Because because each of those tiny results actually, in and of themselves, is at the very least a 6-month peer review process. But if you had to fight all of them in parallel,
quite.
You're giving everybody a target. But once they're published, then and peer reviewed, not just put on archive or on your blog, then it becomes something that you can forget about all that stuff, and you can basically write the wrap-up paper and tie it with a bow.
It's like you're chipping away at the foundation.
Yeah, and that's what we do in science all the time.
Right.
CRISPR is a perfect example. They published papers, and they didn't know what it would become. They published all these little interesting observations scattered around the literature, and then suddenly somebody kind of had an aha moment, and they were able to show its broader utility and then predict its longer term applications. I'm just saying the same thing should be done with any of the data from any of these, whether that's the mummies or, claimed materials or what have you. Don't try to hit the home run. Stop it.
Yeah.
And my God, stop doing science by press report.
Right.
I mean,
you're right about that. Definitely. Yeah. Well, do you know what the problem is too? Is that you'll get something like, oh, we found material at this site, and then as soon as people read that, there's so many assumptions that get made, and then it blows up when they find out that it might be something mundane, right? It's just like maybe do the analysis first and then put out a report.
Where is it?
Oh, he's pulling something out of the cabinet. This is interesting.
Yeah.
Well, this was dangerous when it was Matt Ford. So.
Yeah. I was gonna say when this was Matt Ford.
I'm looking for. I don't have it here. I think but this stuff that was found in New Mexico and claimed to be honeycomb, the alien honeycomb. They said, and I got interested in it. I got a piece of it. I looked at it. I did, 3D tomography on it. And then I got together with some aeronautics experts who then looked into the old literature and said, oh, this is actually from X and X manufacturer in the 1940s, 1950s. So case closed. This whole book that you can get on Amazon about it, it's not alien. What's still interesting about it is that it was dumped at a site where a claimed event occurred. Right. So why would anybody dump it at that site becomes the more compelling question. In the middle of the desert that I've been out to, right? That had nothing to do with anything. Then why would anybody create a dump site there for 2 years with all these metal cans and this other stuff that they threw around? So that's a more interesting question. but that particular thing is no longer evidence. It's off the table.
Right. Wow. Yeah, there's a lot. I just thought of a few things. That's really interesting. So, Garry, we're winding down here, and typically what we do with basically every guest that we have on the show is we like to kind of ask you to either come up with, say, a question. It could be a comment, it could be an idea, it could be it doesn't matter. Just something you want to leave the viewers and us with to really ponder for the rest of our day, maybe even the rest of the week. Something that you really want to circulate through people's brains for them to really, really think about.
That's a tough one.
I mean, the whole episode has pretty much been that already.
Yeah. Well, I mean, here's a question kind of that is simply put, is it possible for something to be here? Right? Before you say it isn't here, is it possible for something to be here? Which is a different question than asking, is there anything out there? Right? And that's what you have to ask. Now, Neil deGrasse Tyson says it's not. They can't be, because, what was this thing? Because maybe they couldn't transport their alien ashtrays. I don't know what it is. He's totally focused on ashtrays. I don't know why. And so, is it possible? And I mean, it doesn't have to be they who shot the rocket off to be here. It could be whatever it is that they programmed their AI to make when it got where it got. Now, to get from one side of the galaxy to the other, I mean, I'll sort of answer part of it for you. To get from one side of the galaxy to another, even at 10,000 miles an hour, only takes 5 billion years. Only. Right? And it's been here for 14 billion years.
Yeah.
So we could do it. And 5 billion years from now, our AI could be planting seeds on another planet somewhere else.
Absolutely.
Kick up the speed a few thousand miles an hour up to, let's say, 0.1 C of light.
Right.
And suddenly you're doing stuff, in 500,000 years. So it's possible. You don't have to go speed of light for the people who got on the ship to get off it on the other side, through time dilation.
Sure.
Right. So that's the thing. So just think about that. Is it possible? And so if it's possible, then what people are seeing isn't necessarily probable, but is on the table scientifically. But people are going to have to ask themselves that. If you can't believe that it's possible for it to happen, game over.
Right.
The other question, which is in parallel and doesn't have to require intertempestuals and interdimensionals, is it possible that another species arose in the distant past, rose to a level of technical confidence and competence that they could create their own AI that would allow them to, accelerate in their development? We're there. We're literally 1,000 years out of mud huts and caves.
Yeah.
It's
it happened quick.
And boom, I remember when I first was brought as a high school student to a laboratory that was doing computer analysis. They were first computers, and they left me alone in the room. That was a mistake. To type into the computer, and I said, "Who is George Washington?" Return error number 518, whatever. Okay. Here we are now, literally 50-ish years later. Yeah, it would be 50 years later. And I could type that in to ChatGPT or Anthropic, and I'd get, I'd have a conversation. And why did he do this, et cetera? So, and we just talked about the large language model for protein design and 1,000 other things that people are using them for. We're using them already in my lab. So, and that only happened in like the last 2 years. Yeah. So fast forward. And so that's a sliver of time, literally 1,000-ish years from mud huts to this. I mean, granted, there was a lot of cultures. Let's say 10,000 years. I don't care.
Even then,
it's and people say, oh well, they would have to leave an industrial footprint. Why? Maybe they just weren't wasteful. Maybe they figured out that they didn't need to, crawl over every surface of the planet and eat everything in sight. And dig up everything to get what they needed. They figured out some shortcuts. Maybe they spent 10,000 years thinking before they did.
Wow.
Is that possible?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. It's possible.
I mean, is it possible that something arose that was intelligent before us? Yes, it did. Homo naledi. 100,000 years before we figured out fire, Homo naledi had fire. They were drawing pictures on walls. They were burying their dead, 3 feet tall, and then they disappeared. 100,000 years before we showed up. Maybe they sat around for 10,000 of that and figured something out and said, okay, well, our country bumpkin cousins are coming down the line, Homo sapiens. Let's leave the surface of the planet to them. We can go somewhere else. I don't know. I'm just guessing, but it happened. We are not the only intelligent species.
And then we have our Nazca Mummies. Problem solved.
Oh, please don't bring
that up. Then they disappear, and then they come back 3 feet tall.
No, I'm not going there. He whose name shall not be spoken.
Yes.
And but it's it has happened.
That's true.
So 1 is a lot. In science, 2 is a lot more than 1.
Yeah.
3 is a little bit better than 2.
Yeah.
Okay. So that would be my question. Could it be? Not is it?
Yeah.
So I'd leave your audience with that.
I love that.
I love that. Yeah, that's brilliant.
I'm
Gary,
going to be thinking about that.
We've overrun on your very tight schedule, so stay on for 2 seconds and we'll say a proper thank you to you. But from me and from Tom and from Gary, thank you everybody for watching, and we will see you on the next episode of the Unidentified Anomalous Podcast. Take care.
Great.
Much love.
Peace out.